Very good morning, everybody. You're very welcome to an specially extended breakfast show for you here on Sky News this morning, live from the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. We'll bring you the Prime Minister's first ever conference speech live. As the city wakes up to rain and overcast skies, the question on everyone's lips is, can Liz Truss brighten the mood? The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, with us very shortly indeed. It is Wednesday, the 5th of October. Changing gears, the Prime Minister prepares to defend her economic plan at party conference, promising a new Britain for a new era against a backdrop of U-turns and accusations of a rebel coup. Missile malfunction. South Korea and the US carry out military drills in response to North Korea's ballistic missile launch. But it doesn't quite go to plan. On the move, Ukraine's president says his military has taken back dozens of southern towns over the last week. We report from inside recaptured Limonin in Donetsk. Police on the hunt for a potential serial killer in California release new CCTV of a person of interest following 6 murders.
Commuter chaos. Train drivers walk out in the latest strike over pay, jobs and conditions. We'll have the union boss on the show.
Also coming up on the programme for you this morning, live here at Tory Party Conference in Birmingham. We'll be looking ahead to the Prime Minister's maiden conference speech with a selection of people, including the former Conservative Party chair, that's Lord Pickles, the Conservative peer Baroness Karen Brady, and the Labour deputy leader of Birmingham Council, who, hardly surprisingly, some might say, is not happy. Why not? We'll find out. Morning, everybody. It's not the best start for a new Prime Minister. A major U-turn on her economic plans. Accusations of a rebel coup, party divides over benefits policy, markets in turmoil and mortgage misery for millions. Today, Liz Truss will attempt to put all of that behind her in her first ever party conference speech, promising a new Britain for a new era. The question is, how will her speech go down with her MPs? Here's Joe Pike.
She seems to be losing control.
How are you feeling about the speech, Prime Minister?
And today, the pressure is on to show she has the strategy and the steel to survive.
I've just got to head off now to a meeting.
After chaos caused by former cabinet ministers at the start of this conference,
get spending under control, but we also...
now senior figures in government are publicly rowing.
I'm very disappointed that members of our own parliamentary party staged a coup, effectively, and undermined the authority of the Prime Minister.
I don't think we should be talking about coups and, I think that sort of language is just too inflammatory.
And 2 cabinet ministers, Penny Mordaunt and Robert Buckland, have been freelancing on benefits policy, calling for a rise in line with inflation.
Well, I first of all...
Ian Duncan-Smith knows the pressure of leadership. He argues Conservatives want to hear an economic pitch.
We don't want recession, we want growth. The plan is how you get there, and to leave people feeling, quite rightly, that there is a sense that the Prime Minister has a clear idea of where she wants to go and knows how to get there.
While there is still loyalty at the top,
the Prime Minister has the full support of this Conservative Party conference, and indeed the parliamentary party is willing her on.
Others want to hear more.
How do you feel as a Conservative member?
Proud, but I'm waiting to hear where we're going next.
I'm interested to hear her views on taxation. I think that's come up a lot this week. I'd like to hear her plans to fund it.
Liz Truss has had a torrid time here. This speech is an opportunity to try and change that, to explain her philosophy, unite her party, but it may be too late. Her first leader's address at Conservative conference may also be her last.
To add to the myriad challenges, a train strike is now underway. Ironic as the conference slogan is getting Britain moving. Joe Pike, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, joined now by the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. Mr Cleverly, it's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed yesterday. You had a speech yesterday in the hall. It seemed to go down very well. Were you pleased?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to set out what UK foreign policy is going to be. Much of it, of course, is continuity, support for Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific tilt, global Britain, but also it was about making sure that I reminded everybody about the need for strategic endurance, sticking with the difficult international issues, particularly our support for Ukraine, to make sure we send the signal that we can't just be outweighted for by our opponents. So they can't just keep doing stuff expecting us to give up. We're going to stick with it, particularly our support for Ukraine. That was one of the points I made in the speech.
You were referring to naysayers as well. You're saying people in the UK were, a little bit down on Team GB. But you said when you're travelling, a lot of people on the other side of the fence are very positive. Who in particular?
Well, the trip I've just come back from, I was in Japan, I was in the Republic of Korea, I was in Singapore. They are really desperate to do business with us. They want to invest with us in things like green energy generation, in helping countries skip coal power and move straight to renewables, defence and security cooperation. There's a real appetite to work with the UK. And these are countries right on the other side of the planet. And I tell you, the same is true in the Americas, in Africa, across Europe, in the ASEAN region, the Southeast Asia. So there's a real appetite to work with us.
The US of America.
No, the US are very, very keen to continue working with us. Had an opportunity.
Not keen on a trade deal, though, are they?
Well, you've got to remember that America is a big and very complex political environment. That individual states have a lot of autonomy. So doing an overall federal level trade deal with America was always going to be complicated. But we are improving trade relations on things like steel.
Okay.
Aluminium, whiskey, beef, loads of things.
Lots to get through. There were a few empty seats in the audience yesterday when you were giving your speech. I was chatting to people, people trying to get back to London and other places because of the rail strike. Thought for the rail workers today?
Well, my thought is for the rail passengers.
Yeah, but
today.
What would you say to the striking workers?
What I'm saying to the striking workers is you've got to remember there are loads of people, not necessarily delegates here, but I know in my constituency a lot of people rely on the trains to get to work, and a lot of the people who get paid only when they get to work, people, cleaners and support staff, if they can't get to work, they don't get paid, they can't work from home, you can't be a cleaner on a Zoom link.
So you're saying get back to work?
What I'm saying is these people need to get to work and the rail workers need to help them get to work by getting back to work themselves.
OK. The Prime Minister yesterday told Arbeth Rigby that she has no regrets. She must have some.
Well, look, certainly none that she's expressed to me. She is really, really keen.
It was a terrible start to the conference.
Well, look, what we are looking to do is get growth into the economy. I am sure the Prime Minister is going to be making that point in her speech. The Chancellor made that point when he spoke to conference. It's about getting growth. When you've got growth, you can fund the public services. You can fund the support packages to families looking to cover their energy bills and the people that need our help and support.
This 45p thing was ridiculous.
Well, look, that programme of support and growth plan that the Chancellor highlighted.
It made it look like a fat cat party, didn't it? And you've had to go back on it.
So the Chancellor put out a package, a growth package, which supported people with their energy bills, talks about investment in our road network to get the economy really growing. 95% of that was ignored, and people were talking just about the 40. People were talking about the 45p tax rate. We wanted to talk about the complete package. Well, look, the point I did support that, but the point is, I also recognise that if you've got this wide-ranging, really positive support package, but people are only talking about 45%, you need to get that distraction out of the way so we can focus on the energy bill support, the infrastructure support, the tax cuts for 30 million.
Yeah.
But it's worth repeating.
Yeah, well,
30 million working people.
The Home Secretary yesterday described backbench moves pushing for that U-turn as a coup. Should the Home Secretary be talking about a coup?
Well, the point I've always made. So the point I've always made is when you're in government, you have a wonderful opportunity to feed your ideas and thoughts in directly to the Prime Minister, and I think that's when you're in government, that's how you should do it.
Yeah, but should the Home Secretary be talking about a coup?
Well, look, she chose the words that she chose. The point I've said.
Would you have chosen that word? No, you wouldn't, would you?
Well, the point I'm saying is that when you're in government, you have the opportunity to feed your ideas straight into the top of the machine. It's always best done around the cabinet table or in the meetings, the cabinet committee meetings that we have. That's how I would do it.
So she was wrong to say it publicly.
Well, as I say, funnily enough, I haven't actually seen the complete context of what she said. But the point is, my view is anything to do with policy or the relationship with other ministers, always better to feed straight into the boss.
OK. What about the Chancellor saying the problem with the mini-budget was because of the trauma of the Queen's death?
Well, I think you've got to imagine we stepped into our new roles, Prime Minister, Chancellor, me at Foreign Secretary. Literally within days, we had the saddest news possible, which was the passing of Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth. That meant that all the focus of what we were doing was shifted onto the funeral arrangements. There were announcements that he had made, which were quite understandably, quite rightly, lost in the moment as we focused on that. And a lot of the discussion and debate that we would normally have about the support package and that kind of stuff, we weren't able to have because of the funeral arrangements of Her Late Majesty. So what we now need to do is we need to lay out, and I'm sure the Prime Minister will be doing that today, laying out what we're doing, why growth is so important, why we're going to give support to energy bills and tax cuts to 30 million people. And these things we now need to get the conversation back onto those.
I want to come back to that, but just let me just one follow-up on that, if I may. Can you really blame the death of the Queen for messing up the mini-budget?
No, that's not.
He did.
That's not what.
Yeah,
that's not what you said. The point we're saying is that when Her Late Majesty passed away, quite rightly, every conversation in the country pretty much was focused on that huge and impactful event, which of course meant that we didn't have the normal discussions. They're not blaming anyone, it's just a statement of fact.
So why not postpone it until you can think it through properly?
So now what we are doing is making sure that the very well thought through growth plan that we've got is fully explained. There's a difference between announcing it, and normally what would happen, we would announce it, then we'd do the media round, we'd explain things. We weren't able to do those things.
So it wasn't thought through properly?
No, it was incredibly well thought through. And the point is, it has support for people trying to pay their bills, tax cuts for millions of workers, stimulus packages for low tax growth zones, low regulation zones. So that we are able to discuss those things in detail now because, quite rightly, the period of mourning was about focusing on Her Late Majesty and the new King. Absolutely right and proper that that's what we focused on.
So if it wasn't thought through properly, why not
You keep saying that.
Well, he's talking about the trauma of the Queen's death, taking his eye off the ball.
You're not listening to my answer.
I am.
It was well thought through. It was a really good package. What happened, of course, is we weren't able to discuss it because, quite rightly, we paused all that political, governmental stuff so we could focus on the really, really sad events of the funeral of Her Late Majesty.
OK, what about support for those who need it most? We were told by Boris Johnson and we were told by Rishi Sunak, if he became Prime Minister, he didn't, I don't think he's actually here at conference this week, that it would be in line, the increase would be in line with inflation, which is about 10%. Potentially the other option is in line with earnings, which is about 5.5%. Which is better?
Well, what we, of course, will do in the normal time scale that we do these things. So we get the inflation figures out in the autumn. They've only fairly recently come out. We will then think about all the needs of the individuals and the groups concerned, and we'll be making an announcement in the spring, which is when we make an announcement about these uprating of benefits. Obviously, we recognise that prices are going up. Obviously, we recognise that puts pressure on people, particularly those people on benefits. Obviously, we'll respond to that, but exactly what the uprating will be decided basically this year and announced early part of next year, which is the normal timescale for these things.
I understand that, but I'm speaking more generally. I mean, you are a close friend of Boris Johnson. You worked with him when he was in London at City Hall. You've worked with him very closely in Downing Street. He thought this through. He's a smart man. He said, in line with inflation.
Yeah, he's not Prime Minister anymore.
He is not. So do you think that he was wrong?
Well, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have got to make decisions based on the circumstances as they are now, not as they were when Boris was Prime Minister. That's what they're going to do. They're going to look at these things in the round. That's what we always do. And the announcements about various upratings of benefits will come out in the early part of next year, which is exactly how they normally would. What I'm not going to do, I'm not going to be the Chancellor today at conference, because the Chancellor is going to be the Chancellor in the spring when that is the, as I say, that's the normal timescale that we use.
He is not a Prime Minister anymore, but he is still an MP. He's a backbencher for now. There's quite a few other backbenchers who are quite influential, not least Michael Gove. And those backbenchers have already caused one U-turn with this government. Surely you should be taking into account what they think to avoid another embarrassing U-turn.
What you're describing as a U-turn is the smallest element of a really big and significant support package to families, tax cut to families, stimulus package for the British economy. The little bit, the 45p was a very, very
small... every single newspaper. It's been referred to as a humiliating climb down
as I've said,
by the Prime Minister. It was giving people in the country...
You guys were constantly talking about the 45p tax rate, which is why we had to take it away, so that us guys...
it wasn't because you thought it was the wrong thing to do.
So that us guys could talk about the 95% of that package, which was about cutting tax for working families, support for people trying to pay their energy bills, giving growth zones around the country, infrastructure investment for transport, which unlocks the growth in the economy. That's what we wanted to talk about.
Can I just clarify with you? The only reason that you took away the 45p to 40p decision as part of that mini budget was because you were under pressure from the media. Is that what you're saying?
No, what we said was
it was
a distraction because that was the only thing you guys wanted to talk about. We weren't able to talk about the tax cuts for 30 million working people, the growth zones, the support package for people trying to pay their energy bills, the growth plan for the country. That's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about these positive things. If you've got to
let you go. I'm being
recognise.
But the thing is, we do. That's true. But just to clarify, you're saying that if you hadn't been picked up on the 45p, then you'd have slipped that under the carpet, and so all these fat cat millionaires would have got another £50,000 a year. That's just what you said.
If your viewers want to know what I said, they can just rewatch what I said rather than what you said I said.
And you know what? Hundreds of thousands of people will be viewing it on Twitter as well. So let's see what they think about it. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Much appreciated. Thank you, Foreign Secretary. Looking at the papers for you this morning. It's the papers again. Tory open warfare. That's how the Eye describes the situation at the party conference after days of infighting over tax cut U-turns, and fears for benefit payments leave Liz Truss struggling after just 29 days in charge. The Metro pictures the PM looking a little like Bob the Builder and asks appropriately, perhaps, can she fix it? The Telegraph looks ahead to her keynote conference speech today with a warning that things will get worse before they get better, but says it will be worth it in the end. The Express also adopts the building theme ahead of the speech in Birmingham. The Times, too, leads with Liz Truss's expected comments. Brace for more change, the headline there. Well, let's hear from Liz Truss, should we? She was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, and she had absolutely no shame in performing a U-turn on the government's plan to scrap the 45p higher rate of tax.
Frankly, the 45p wasn't a priority policy, and I listened to people, and I think there's absolutely no shame, Beth, in a leader listening to people and responding. And that's the kind of person I am, and I've been totally honest and upfront with people, but everything I've done as Prime Minister is focused on helping people get through what is a very difficult winter.
First, hello of the morning to Ali Fortescue. Good morning, good morning. You've been here all week. What's the mood been like?
It's been fascinating. I mean, we came into it and we knew that the backdrop was pretty bleak, you know, what was happening with the markets last week, the massive slump in the polls. But actually, it's been worse than I think people thought.
Yeah, let's go this way, because other people are live on air at the moment. Let's wander down. Tell me about where we are.
So, we are in...
Have a wander around, have a look.
The conference hall, you know, people setting up their stalls. This is a chance for the party to sort of pitch themselves, setting out their stall. Here we're hearing, obviously, from, you know, cabinet ministers. The big moment, though, today is Liz Truss. So much is hanging on this. These sorts of speeches can make or break leadership. You'll remember Theresa May.
Yeah. Let me just refer to this. This is the vehicle that we actually saw up in Liverpool. So they do tend to do the rounds, don't they?
Yeah.
This is the Royal Mail trying to get as many electric vehicles as possible, hopefully 45,000 within the next 5 years. They do put a little bit of noise in them, apparently, so that people can hear them coming.
I didn't know that.
Oh, well, there you go.
Very interesting.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
So we're not far from the big hall, and that is where Liz Truss is going to be making her speech, and so much is hanging on it. What I will be interested to see is how many people are actually in the hall, because I've spoken to quite a few MPs who, for a combination of being a bit disillusioned and the train strike, so they're not even going to turn up.
Not sure if you could hear, I'm not sure if you could hear James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary. Do you have any thoughts on what he had to say?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was fascinating that he was basically saying it wasn't a U-turn. I think, you know, the 45p cut tax rate was something that a lot of people think was the trigger that spooked the markets. This was a real rabbit out of the hat moment. Liz Truss saying she didn't even confer with her cabinet before that news came out. So I think that was pretty
And the
surprising.
Chancellor blaming the death of the Queen.
That was interesting. Yeah, the Foreign Secretary, he said...
well, the Chancellor blamed the death of the Queen, and then he was saying... and then he was doubling down on that.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. So we had James Cleverly just there basically saying, you know, discussions weren't able to be had because of the death of the Queen. I mean, I'm not sure that is something that's going to fly with everyone.
Yeah. And also his comment about benefits and whether they would be going up by 10%, which is inflation, or 5.5%, which is real-time wages. It was a Boris Johnson plan. He said Boris Johnson's not the Prime Minister anymore.
I mean,
there's nothing as X as an X, is there?
Fascinating, hasn't it? I mean, Penny Mordaunt yesterday, senior cabinet minister, former rival for the leadership race, saying, going out and at odds with what Liz Truss has been hinting at, saying that she thinks that should happen, that welfare should be raised in line with inflation. So you have division, I think, from the top down, and privately one cabinet member told me too that they think that's the case. So I think this is a divided party, and healing that is going to be really, really difficult for Liz Truss today.
So what happens as far as party conferences are concerned? They travel around the country. They used to be always by the seaside, of course, didn't they? Not anymore. The Conservatives they generally go to either Brighton or here or Manchester. So we thought yesterday we'd take the opportunity to have a little bit of a wander around Birmingham, see what was going on. Can you name... Here we go. Here's the quiz early on. Can you name 2 Birmingham bands? Shall I tell you?
Yes.
One of them is
please.
UB40.
Yes.
There's another one that you wouldn't have got called Musical Youth. That was a hit in the 80s, a one-hit wonder. And also this one.
Less than a month ago, and this was Liz Truss celebrating her win against Rishi Sunak. 4 weeks later, and she's facing her first real test in front of the party faithful as she delivers her maiden speech at Tory party conference. It's been a challenging journey so far, with more twists and U-turns than Spaghetti Junction. Gravelly Hill is the road intersection opened 50 years ago when Anthony Barber released his controversial budget, seen as an even bigger giveaway than that of Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. When this was in the charts, unemployment was the main concern. Now it's the economy that's causing sleepless nights for the government.
Do you think benefits should be uprated in line with inflation?
Tory members who made Liz Truss PM and her recalcitrant backbenchers want to know what she can do to turn around the party's bleak future and ensure they have a fighting chance at the next election.
She says that she has a plan and doesn't care about being liked. So can Liz Truss's bullish approach fend off those rebellious big beasts around her?
Her next challenge will be an increase in benefits. Will she go with a 10% rise in line with inflation, which is what many in her party are pressing for, or will she halve that increase and instead match the average wage? The new PM has much to prove if she's to support a country with so many struggling with a choice between heating and eating.
Lots of earworms for you there this morning. Coming up, joined by the pollster Sir John Curtis, who's told Tory activists that Labour are likely to gain power. I get the thoughts of Tory peer Lord Vasey of Didcot ahead of the Prime Minister's speech this morning. And just after 8, joined by the former Cabinet Secretary and former Conservative Party Chairman, the Lord Pickles. And we'll bring you the Prime Minister's speech live here on Sky News. We're expecting that from around about 11 o'clock this morning. These things do tend to slip a little bit, but we are expecting it around about 11 o'clock. And we have a specially extended breakfast show for you this morning, right up until the Prime Minister's speech. Meantime, let's have a look at some other news making headlines for you on the programme this morning. A missile by North Korea this week. We told you about that yesterday, didn't we? Well, South Korea and the US have responded with volleys of rockets into the sea off Japan. However, the show of force led to an apology from military representatives after a misfire from one of the rockets. South Korean officials say no injuries have been reported from the accident. Earlier this week, North Korea fired what was believed to be a ballistic missile over Japan for the first time in 5 years. The Ukrainian President Zelensky claims his country's main gains against Russia's forces by liberating settlements Russia has declared annexed. While UK military intelligence says Ukraine continues to make progress in operations along both the northeastern and southern fronts, Russia moved to annex the regions after holding what it called referenda over several days that were denounced by Kiev and also the West. The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, proclaimed their annexation last Friday. In his nightly address, Mr. Zelensky said it's only a matter of time until Ukraine seizes victory.
We've got some good news, both from the front line and from the diplomatic front. First, the Ukrainian army is carrying out a pretty fast and powerful advance in the south of our country as part of the current defence operation. Dozens of settlements have already been liberated from the Russian sham referendum this week alone, in the Kherson region, Kharkiv region, Luhansk region and Donetsk region altogether. Our warriors do not stop, and it's only a matter of time before we oust the occupier from all our land.
Well, a little later on in the programme, you can watch Alex Crawford's special report on the recapturing of Lehman, which is a battlefield success for Ukraine, but one that's come at a significant cost to civilians. Police in California have released a video showing a person of interest in connection with several shootings believed to be connected. They used ballistic tests to link the deadly shootings of 6 men and the wounding of 1 woman and say the repeated crimes meet the definition of a serial killer. There's a $125,000 reward for information leading to an arrest.
We don't know what the motive is. What we do believe is that it's mission-oriented, right? This person's on a mission. Just appears to be very fluid and intentional in what that one person or multiple people are doing.
Rail passengers are again facing a day of disruption with another strike taking place in the long-running dispute over pay and conditions. Let's find out more. Should we, Milena, standing by for us at London Euston, which is where we were supposed to be heading, but I don't think we will today. Hi, Milena, what's going on?
Hi, Kay. Well, the station is pretty desolate. We've seen a trickle of passengers whose trains are unaffected, but mainly huge disruption is expected because 13 companies, drivers from 13 companies, are taking part in this walkout over pay conditions. And it is part of a long-standing dispute. Unions saying that the wages are not rising in line with skyrocketing prices at a time of a cost of living crisis. On the other hand, the rail companies are saying that the pandemic has left them with a huge financial hole that neither the passengers nor the taxpayer should plug in their view. So reforms are needed because people are simply not using the railways in the same way. Now, the new Transport Secretary, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, has met with union bosses. She indicated she can see their point of view, but there is no compromise on the horizon. So we may see these strikes carrying on for months more.
OK, thank you. Also making news for you this morning, the world's richest man, you'll remember, Elon Musk, has agreed to buy Twitter after backtracking on the original deal. Musk's lawyer says he will pay the $44 billion fee, which had been agreed back in April. Musk was sued by Twitter in July for attempting to back out of the agreement. New court documents describe allegations from Angelina Jolie about abusive behaviour by her ex, Brad Pitt, before they divorced. She claims the actor shook and pushed her on a private plane in 2016 and assaulted two of her children. Mr. Pitt has never been charged, and his representative strongly denies the allegations. A famine could be declared in Somalia within weeks, affecting hundreds of thousands of people in the country's worst drought-hit areas. It would be a rare declaration and a sign of the dire consequences from the worst drought the Horn of Africa has seen in decades. The United Nations has said thousands of people have already died, with 500,000 more at risk. To California now, where things got a little wild at school, where animal services were called in to remove a coyote from a bathroom. Bless him, terrified. The frightened pup had scurried into a cubicle before it was captured and then safely released far away from the campus. And off he goes. Coming up, joined by the pollster Sir John Curtice, who's told Tory activists that Labour are likely to gain power as they grow their poll lead. That to come. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Conservative Party conference here in Birmingham today. It's the maiden speech by the new Prime Minister. Around about 11 o'clock, specially extended breakfast show for you to bring that to you. Stay tuned for all the coverage. You've already missed the Foreign Secretary, if you've only just joined us, James Cleverly, of course. He told me they weren't able to have the discussion and debate about the budget that they would have liked because of the Queen's death, and said that the government's tax reversal was only on a tiny part of the overall support package.
When Her Late Majesty passed away, quite rightly, every conversation in the country, pretty much, was focused on that huge and impactful event, which of course meant that we didn't have the normal discussions. They're not blaming anyone, it's just a statement of fact.
So why not postpone it until you can think it through properly?
So now what we are doing is making sure that the very well thought through growth plan that we've got is fully explained. What you're describing as a U-turn is the smallest element of a really big and significant support package to families, tax cut to families, stimulus package for the British economy. The little bit, the 45p, was a very, very
every single newspaper it's been referred to as a humiliating climb down by the Prime Minister. It was giving people in the country.
You guys were constantly talking about the 45p tax rate, which is why we had to take it away.
Media's fault. Now, the party conference here in Birmingham comes with a backdrop of the Conservatives trailing Labour by double digits, at least, in the polls. One survey last week put them 33 points behind the opposition. Joining us now to discuss this further is Sir John Curtice. He's Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Hello to you, Sir John. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Is this government toast?
All of the ingredients for electoral defeat are in place. The question is whether or not in the end they are combined and put into the oven and thereby baked into the memories and perceptions of voters. So let me explain. We've now got on average across 10 opinion polls a 25-point lead for the Labour Party in the polls. That represents no less than an 8% swing from Conservative to Labour since the announcement of the fiscal statement last Friday week. That is comparable to the swing that happened in September 1992 in the wake of Black Wednesday, which was the last time that a Conservative administration got into trouble with the financial markets. Then the swing was 7.5%, though, by the way, only after a month had elapsed. The second thing that happened in the wake of Black Wednesday, an event from which that Conservative government never recovered electorally, is a serious damage to the Conservatives' reputation for economic competence. Before the fiscal statement, it was already the case that Labour and Conservative were neck and neck on that criterion in most polls. But now the polls have almost, around Labour Party, around 40% of people thinking it's best on the economy, and only around 20% for the Conservatives. And the third element that's in place is serious damage to the popularity of the Prime Minister. That's what happened to John Major in 1992. In the case of Liz Truss, across the piece of all of the polls, her level of unpopularity, minus 30 something or other, is comparable to the level of unpopularity that Boris Johnson was suffering just before he was brought down as Prime Minister. So you put those three things together. The crucial question now is this simply a short-term reaction, which perhaps it is, or have voters been so discomforted and unsettled, not simply by the settlement itself? A lot of this movement that has occurred in the wake of the reaction of the financial markets. Does the sight of a government apparently being criticised, not able to have control of the markets, is that sight going to be something that voters remember and not forget between now and 2024?
The thing is, Professor, when people are stopped in the street and asked which way they're going to vote, they potentially say something very different to when they get into the polling booth and they've got their pen in their hand. How do you bake that in when it comes to being pollsters?
Kay, I think that's a long-standing journalist claim for which there isn't a great deal of honest truth. The polls are not always right. I immediately acknowledge that. They weren't right in 2015 or in 2017, although the errors were in opposite directions. So they were pretty good in 2019. In any case, even if you think the polls are biased in one direction or another, unless you think that bias has been introduced during the course of the last 10 days, what you do need to bear in mind is that all of the polls show this very, very substantial movement. So we can argue about the level, but you've got to come up with a very complicated theory indeed to explain why all of a sudden what was a 9-point Labour lead is now a 25-point Labour lead as the result of voters not being honest with the pollsters. I would suggest to you that that thesis does not have any obvious credibility, and that the Conservative Party has to realise, accept and try to work out how it gets around the fact that it is now in deep, deep electoral trouble, far deeper trouble than it's been at any point since 2010.
A final thought before I let you go. What can Liz Truss say today, do you think, in order to make an impact on the polls over the coming days?
Well, one big problem that she simply has, leave aside the question of whether or not voters buy into her mission of a small state and less regulation, about which there's quite a lot of doubt, is that the other thing that's coming out, something that J.L. Johnson's poll's done here, just ask people what do they think about Liz Truss, and the dominant word that's coming across at the moment is incompetence. She needs at least to put in a good rhetorical performance to at least begin to persuade voters that she looks and sounds like a prime minister. Not sure how much success she will necessarily persuade them in the short run about how things have been handled in the last 10 days, but at least she can begin to look like a prime minister, then perhaps voters might begin to believe that she could be one.
OK, it's good to take the time to join us this morning, Professor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we will see that speech from the Prime Minister at around about 11 o'clock this morning. So do stay tuned our way, especially extended edition of The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Live coverage from around about 11 o'clock. Her maiden Prime Minister's speech. Let's see what she has to say. Returning now to the war in Ukraine, where President Zelensky has said his military has made major rapid advances against Russian forces. A resident of one newly liberated city in the east has told Sky News, "We don't care who's in control, we just want them to stop shooting." Let's have a look in more detail. The city of Le Mans is in the province of Donetsk, which was illegally annexed by Vladimir Putin, and that was last week. Now, though, Ukrainian soldiers are in charge. Our special correspondent, and that's Alex Crawford, has been speaking to some of those who remain. And a warning, her report contains images of dead Russian servicemen from the very beginning.
There were broken and bloated bodies of Russian soldiers on the road into Liman as we entered. Testament to the ambush wrought on them by a Ukrainian force bent on retaking this town. In amongst the dead, we saw mines too. The retreating army wanted to kill as they were being pushed back. Inside the strategic eastern city, the battle to reclaim it has left it in tatters. Street after street has been hit. There are only the symbols of the occupation left behind, and constant signs of looting with emptied cash machines and shops, including pharmacies, broken into and pillaged. The police station still has its signage in Russian, but the gate has been freshly painted over with the blue and yellow colours of the Ukrainian flag. Just a few days earlier, this is what it looked like. Russian flags, which once flew here, have been burned. The landscape's fast changing right now, and this victory came easily, the soldiers say.
In Mariupol, battle biggest.
And here in Liman?
No, Russians go away. A little shoot, go away.
The Ukrainians insist there's more of the same to come, but how quickly is an unknown.
It's hard to answer this question because the weather can change, but we hope it'll be fast, and we'll see.
Russia had used Liman as a vital transport hub. Its railway lines were key to supplying its troops in Donetsk, one half of the Donbass, as well as its military in the second half, Luhansk. And they were in control here for months. The two sides had been fighting over it ever since, and it's badly battle-scarred. Even hospitals weren't spared. The residents who remained here are wary of just about everything, being called Russian collaborators because they stayed, as well as surviving a fast-approaching winter. Every passing military vehicle is glanced at anxiously. The Russian Z has a Ukrainian cross now over it.
What is it you're worried about? Are you fearful of the Ukrainians, or you're fearful of the Russians, or both?
War over land, he says, but we've got nothing to heat our houses, no electricity, nothing. This whole area, according to Vladimir Putin, is now Russia, but those we spoke to said they hadn't voted because of fighting, and they have other more pressing worries. We don't care who's in control here. It could be the devil, she says. We just want them to stop shooting. The town has virtually emptied, and those left have no power, no water, and have survived under a barrage of missiles and rockets. Dislodging the Russians has come at a price, but leaving wasn't an option for these people.
Все у меня тут. Куда я поеду? На каком основании? От страха. Ну, не было у меня страха.
Кому надо? Кому не надо это? Текают, все потекали, и город весь пустой, никого нету.
Natalia shows us the shelters they've been living in, dark and cold and about to get much colder.
От і все. Ні роботи, ні пенсії, нічого, ні зарплати, нічого в нас нема. Діти наші, без зарплати, без роботи. Це життя чи ні? Все, я вже не можу більше.
The Ukrainian police who've returned to their old jobs try to offer some hope. It's just our second day here, Dmitro says. We can't fix everything at once. We know you need it. They've survived, but this war has left them with barely a life. And already the troops have moved forward to try to recapture more land whilst they have the momentum. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Liman in eastern Ukraine.
The Prime Minister will today acknowledge her plans to reshape the country will cause disruption, but insists they're necessary to boost economic growth, with division in the party already beginning to show. However, does she have the support to carry out her plans? Let's talk in more detail. The former Culture Secretary, now Conservative peer, Lord Vasey. Hello to you, my Lord. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. What does she have to do today to win people over?
Well, it's been a terrible conference. It's been a terrible conference because of the unforced error of the mini-budget, but it's also not been helped by lots of other senior Conservatives pitching in with their own views, whether they're ex-cabinet ministers or indeed serving cabinet ministers. So she has to show a great deal of leadership in her party speech. I'm concerned by some of the reports I've been reading today in the newspapers where she's going to talk about disruption. In my view, the great British public want no more disruption. They're going to face a hugely disruptive winter without any help from the politicians. But she has to somehow, I think, reassure her party. There are lots of people who say that a conference speech is there to talk to the voters, but given the terrible events of this conference, she really has to reassure her party that she's got what it takes to lead them. And also, I think when she became Prime Minister, although it was kind of Westminster Village thing that she didn't include enough Sunak supporters in her cabinet and so on, it does, you do have to unite the Tory party. The Tory party is factionalised, and she has to reach out and show the whole swathe of her party that she is going to work with all of them.
What is she, as far as the Conservative Party is concerned, what can they take from this week, or Conservative Party members, what can they take from this week as successes?
They can't take any successes from this week. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. It's been a terrible conference. It was a mixture of depressing and black humour. What they can take from this week, I guess, is that it was a disaster, and they cannot allow things to carry on like this. So they have to get behind their Prime Minister. There is no alternative, to coin a phrase. Everybody loves quoting Margaret Thatcher and the Tory party 30 years on, but there is no alternative. They have to get behind her. And at the same time, the Prime Minister has to meet them halfway. She has to, I'm afraid, potentially curb her radicalism. She's got an election to win in 18 months' time. And she has to be more inclusive. So the two sides, as it were, have to be somewhere in the middle. So all they can take from this conference is that it's been a disaster and they can't let it happen again.
OK. Can they win the next election?
Yes, I think they can win the next election. For me, what will win them, the Tories, the election, will be how on earth we get through this winter. If this government can show that it's not going to make any more mistakes, that it will be, as it were, by the side of the voter as we struggle with our energy bills, rising mortgage rates, rising food prices, an extremely unstable international situation. If we can get through to the spring relatively unscathed and the government can show it's played an active part in getting us there, I think the voters will give the Prime Minister and indeed the Tory party a second chance. I always thought, for example, that Boris Johnson would probably beat Keir Starmer because I didn't think Keir Starmer had made the connection with the voters. I think at the moment we are potentially handing him the election on a plate. If we do things right in the next few months, we can take that plate back.
OK, it's good to talk to you, my lord. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you. On our way, with just coming this way a little bit, on our way again to the Falklands stand. I think James Cleverly was there yesterday.
Yeah, I think he was. Liz Truss was also in here. She was by that bus just there.
Oh, was she?
Yeah.
Talking about hydrogen and hydrogen fuel. We'll be talking about that throughout the course of the day. Before that, though, let's bring in Mark Pollard. Hi, Mark. How are you? Just let him have this microphone. How are you? Grab hold of that, if you don't mind. Tell me about your stand, the Falkland Islands, and what interest there's been.
Yeah, so there's been huge interest, and it's fantastic. So in the Falklands, we rely on cross-party support to support our freedom and right to self-determination. And we had that 40 years ago when our freedom was taken away from us, and we've had great support from politicians and party members, and we're at the Labour conference as well. So
I know, we saw you. I'm going to move out of the way, and then our cameraman can just look at the map of the Falklands just to remind people it's a long way away, but you are still very proudly British.
Oh, absolutely, yes, 100% British. We had a referendum back in 2013 where we asked the question whether people wanted to retain our status as British overseas territory. And we had a 92% turnout at the referendum. 92%, goodness. Absolutely, and 99.8% voted to remain as a British overseas territory. So absolutely, very British.
OK, looking at those penguins there, I remember Penguin Island playing a very key role in the Falklands War.
Absolutely, so it's the 40th anniversary now as well, So we're here again, just reminding people of what the modern Falklands are, and hopefully spreading the message.
Actually, I remember Bluff Cove, Fitzroy, Walker Creek, Goose Green. Goodness, all bringing back memories. What happened when the Foreign Secretary came to talk to you?
So he was again very supportive, which is fantastic, and the British government for ever since 1982 have been steadfast in their support for our self-determination. And the Foreign Secretary was no different. He repeated that message and came to our reception as well and spoke there and reiterated that message. So
I'm not sure I got an invite for that. Never mind.
My apologies.
Not at all. Talk to me in more detail about energy and where you are as far as energy is concerned. Are you embracing new energy forms?
So at the moment, about 90% of the rural areas, the energy is supplied by solar panels and wind. So that's a fantastic story. And within the Stanley, the capital itself, we have about a third of our energy is wind power. But in energy in general, we also have huge amounts of discovered hydrocarbons. So there's a potential that we could be part of the the energy issue that the UK are facing, energy security. So the Falklands could be key in that, but we'll see.
And what are people asking you when they come and see the stand? Because obviously it's the Falkland Isles still has a very warm part in people's hearts.
Yeah, so we get all sorts of questions from.
Is that you behind?
Yes, it is. So I'm speaking in our Parliament there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we get every question from sort of why are you here? What are the Falklands? How does the government work? How can I get there? It's fantastic. I mean, there's a whole range.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as the reception is concerned, what sort of reception did you get here as opposed to up at the Labour Party? Did you get a warm reception in both?
Absolutely, yeah. So my colleague spoke at the Labour Party, and I got a chance to speak at this one and introduce the Foreign Secretary. But we had at the reception here, we had about 450 people come along and support us. So the room was absolutely packed. It was brilliant.
And what is it that you need from the Brits at the moment?
I think we're sort of unlike 40 years ago. We're not coming and asking for things really. It's I mean we absolutely do ask for the support for our right to self-determination. That is one thing that we can't get too relaxed about. We have to continue there. The threat's still there, but we're keen to sort of put the message forward that we're a sort of responsible partner now. We're
what's the population at the moment?
3,200.
Okay.
Yeah,
amazing. And youngsters, you managing to keep youngsters?
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we send our sort of 15, 16-year-olds away to do sixth form in the UK, and then university as well. And they leave university with no debt, and we don't sort of bond them or make them choose. We don't choose their subjects for them in any way. But most of them return, which is fantastic.
Amazing. How long will it take you to get home?
So I leave tomorrow evening, and I'll get home on Saturday. So it's going to take me 2 days.
OK, well, safe journey, safe travels. It's great to talk to you. Can I just take that back? Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Ali's still with us, of course. There you go. Ali, let's walk back this way. Liz Truss, about 11 o'clock, she's going to make her speech. Listening to what our guests have been saying, she's got a hill to climb.
She does.
Let's say a mountain.
I think that's a fair assessment. It is 1 month exactly since she became leader of the Conservatives. We came into this conference, I think, knowing it was going to be difficult. But, I mean, we've had basically all-out revolt privately. Lots of backbenchers really furious with the fact that she hasn't reached out to them, annoyed about the 45p tax cut. Then we had the U-turn, and we've had privately cabinet ministers who are annoyed about the U-turn and who also are waging the next battle on inflation level rises to benefits, which is something Liz Truss has hinted she doesn't want to see. Penny Mordaunt yesterday came out and said that she thinks that should happen. So this is an unruly cabinet, and I think it's hard for Liz Truss to show that she has a united party.
What about those backbenchers like Michael Gove? He's straight in there.
Exactly. I mean, I think,
Do you think benefits and how much they're going to go up by is going to be the next big issue for them?
100%. I think, we've already seen that play out in the middle of conference yesterday. Her first conference, this should be a victory lap, Kay.
Yeah.
She's someone that is a darling of the party. She is in her element at these sorts of things. But I think, these sorts of speeches can make or break a Prime Minister. I think the best bet for her will be getting through it.
A quick thought on Suella Braverman and the fact that James Cleverly had a bit of a swipe at her this morning, saying she should have kept it. Tell the boss, not publicly.
And yesterday, so she said she accused backbenchers of a coup against the Prime Minister. He was suggesting he doesn't think that's the right sort of language. And I think privately that is a view shared by a lot of people.
OK, lovely. Thanks very much indeed.